You're watching The End of History, a video essay series about Ridley and Tony Scott. So now you know the barest outline of the life and work of the brothers and their company Scott Free. What you don't yet know is why this matters so much to us, your hosts.
Scout Tafoya, a critic, author, and filmmaker from Doylestown, Pennsylvania.
And Tucker Johnson, a filmmaker and writer from the delectably named Belchertown, Massachusetts.
You are from Belchertown, right? I got that right?
I am.
Okay, great. I wasn't sure if you were born somewhere else. A brief sketch, so we're not just voices in the abyss. We met in 2008 in a pretty loose screenplay class at Emerson College, the nation's loan shark. We did get to hold an original copy of the script for Joe Dante's movie Piranha in our hands once, because the professor was buddies with Alan Arkush. That was pretty cool.
Anyway, we bonded first and foremost over the movies that weren't being taught or discussed at all in the curriculums. We started working together on films in 2010, but we started jawing about them immediately. The assassination of Jesse James specifically was one of the first films we talked about.
And wouldn't you know it, a Scott-free production. It wasn't the first time we'd found ourselves in thrall to a Scott product. Heaven knows, movies with which we'd later discover we had shared history.
I imagine you sitting in a dark basement room, bent over papers and computer screens. Is that accurate?
When I was a kid, the first film I saw was James Cameron's Aliens, which I'll dig into a little more later, and the film on which I built my career as a video essayist was Alien 3. But what that means for our purposes right now is that Ridley Scott's original Alien looms large in my conception of cinema.
To this day, Alien really does feel, and not to blow its importance out of proportion, but, well, alien.
Science fiction was headed in this direction, but we had never seen anything like it, and I think a lot of Americans hadn't either. The beautiful sets, covered with a malevolent camera, like a satanic point of view of these gargantuan, dreadful environs.
There's just such a stately beauty to that film. Next to his proper feature debut, The Duelists, you get this sense of a man who did seem to literally find a way to transpose the lighting of art from the 17th century.
While making this project, we've had many, many opportunities to just sit and marvel at these compositions. I mean, Jesus fucking Christ. So Alien was my first Ridley Scott. What was yours?
Gladiator. The first one I was conscious of being a Ridley Scott movie, and it's worth pointing out that obviously Gladiator had a huge effect on the production of American film, but it was also one of those movies you count on having inspired most of our classmates at school. By the time we got to film school, Gladiator's popularity as a phenomenon had obviously waned slightly, replaced by this, I dare say.
Why so serious?
But this was one of those movies that kind of showed young kids what epic filmmaking could be.
What followed were two films that blew our young minds, Hannibal and Black Hawk Down. Hannibal was a film that I was desperate to see. I all but dragged my father to go see it on opening day. Why I wanted to see a then 64-year-old Anthony Hopkins cut people to ribbons in a sequel to a movie I hadn't even seen? Weird kid, what can I say? Obsessed with famous murderers, lover of horror cinema at a young age. You had a slightly different first experience with Hannibal, if I'm correct?
Yep. Horror movies weren't in my wheelhouse at all when I was in my teens. If I saw one, it usually happened outside of my mother's supervision. At a sleepover at a friend's house, an older brother was watching Hannibal. I caught a glimpse of it from another room, and before I knew it, the movie had pulled me in, as if in a trance, until I was standing right near the TV, watching Anthony Hopkins remove the top of Ray Liotta's head and expose his brain. I wasn't even afraid, I just didn't know that movies could do things like that.
I do consciously remember thinking that its musicality was quite different from a lot of what I had seen him to that point, and would become a staple of movies that I would obsess over later. The idea of watching a movie that seemed indebted on the one hand to William Blake's paintings and words, but also to opera. It opened my eyes to the idea that horror could be a voluptuous thing, a place free of the shame of propriety, violence as pure, unbridled spectacle.
I learned that in a slightly different way. I remember seeing Blade Runner not long after Hannibal. There are a million things that you can take away from Blade Runner, but the stuff that really stuck were two sequences. The deaths of Zora and of Pris. Of course, I had seen death on screen. I'd seen women die on screen. But this was different. It was brutal. The women were unarmed. It changed my whole outlook of women on film, especially how violence against them was handled.
Which contrasts very much with Thelma and Louise.
For sure. Thelma and Louise is a joyride of a film, and to have two women at the center of that was also really formative for me. My mother only saw the need to have only like a handful of VHS tapes in the house. Thelma and Louise was one of them. Another was Gone with the Wind. As I grew up watching these movies, the full picture of my mother started to reveal itself. This was a woman who had to carefully handpick films to represent her worldview. She wanted the women she watched to be strong, to have agency, even if they had to spend the entirety of the film taking it for themselves.
All right, hey, just calm down. We're just having a little fun, that's all.
Looks like you got a real fucked up idea of fun. Go on. Turn around. In the future, when a woman's crying like that, she isn't having any fun.
Blade Runner, as we've said, wasn't a huge hit at the time, something of an unfortunate pattern for Ridley. While Tony was painting America several shades of blood red and making a name for himself as Don Simpson's favorite son, Ridley was foundering, with the exception of Thelma and Louise. I remember specifically, as I was finding my footing as a film critic, seeking out 1492 because I had heard it had such an odd reputation. And I was, of course, transfixed. So many competing impulses, beautiful creativity on the one hand, the stuff I come to Ridley's cinema of living frescoes to experience, and truly misguided revisionism on the other. The film paints Columbus as a misunderstood genius and visionary, not the man who helped ensure centuries of slavery and genocide. But still, how could I not be transfixed by something so wrong? I had the same feeling watching Exodus, his first film shot after Tony died.
A case can be made that he rushes into this to take his mind off of his sorrow, but also because his movies don't really fuck around with the idea of God until the 2010s. God is remote, just like Ridley is.
And this was a chance for him to finally start confronting the godless universe in a more productive, aggressive way than he ever had before. Tony dying was also a ground-shaking moment for culture, as well as for his brother. With the incredible, unstoppable kind of ringing in our ears, we were suddenly forced to think of this body of work that never seemed like it was going to have an endpoint as a finite grouping. Film criticism fundamentally changes in the wake of Tony's passing. A generation of new critics suddenly at major outlets start to take him and other directors who weren't treated with the respectability of the likes of Kurosawa or Bergman very seriously indeed. He's no longer just the wild-eyed maker of blockbuster trash, a reputation he had a hard time shaking in life. I know I personally really only had a relationship to The Hunger before his death. I had seen cool movies before, but a film that starts with a leather-clad orgy with David Bowie set to Bauhaus, that was quite simply the coolest thing I'd ever seen. It took me a while to realize that Tony's vision of cool may have changed clothes, but he never lost the gripping, sensational verve of that first film.
Tony's death spells the end for movies with tactile sensations in them. Just look at this, from Unstoppable. Now, nothing in the frame would be real.
Come on, Frank.
AWBR officials have no comment. Barnes is attempting to manually break the last bar of 777. He's actually running on top of the grain cars and jumping in the gas.
Frank. Let's go, Frank.
Looks like 777 is slowing down.
I do understand this is some sort of an attempt to try to... Yes, come on, you can do it!
Ridley remains one of the only filmmakers you can rely on for the kind of shrapnel-flying, big explosions, squibs, and corpses-style filmmaking, especially in America, at this budget range. I mean, even look at movies a little less remarkable. American Gangster ends with this incredible piece of filmmaking. This is the real deal.
Police! Drop it! Get out! Get out! Drop the gun! Don't do it! Drop the gun! Don't do it! Drop it! Got it!
We both still sat mouths agape at The Last Duel and Alien Covenant, movies we defended loudest among fans. But that was not unexpected. After all, when we were kids, we were stunned into stupidity by Black Hawk Down.
When you're a red-blooded kid from the middle of nowhere with a video game problem and a fascination with bank robberies and guns and soldiers and stuff,
Which we both were.
Black Hawk Down was Christmas morning. For kids who'd bought into the full metal propaganda machine of the US military and Hollywood, I mean, we bought it all of it, hook, line, and sinker. What are you playing at recess? What are you playing on the Super Nintendo? Guys shooting each other.
Black Hawk Down was unlike anything we'd ever seen. In this sequence, 2 men volunteer to knowingly sacrifice themselves to save the downed pilot of a Black Hawk helicopter. Seeing this sequence as violence-loving 12-year-olds was formative. Watching this film now, we can only see it in the context as one of 1,000 deeply immoral American military interventions in our lifetime, and the film's valorization of it.
It is impossible to see the wantonly violent depiction of the deaths of so many Somalians on screen as anything but a serious step backwards for the American cinema, for its laundering American militarism through its most charismatic images. But at the ripe age of 12, we didn't see any of this. We saw 2 men putting themselves in harm's way to save a comrade, knowing they might lose everything to do so.
Put you down.
C2, we're at the 6-4 crash site, securing perimeter.
Roger that.
You all right?
Yeah, I'm good.
You're locked and loaded. Any skitties come around these corners, you watch our backs.
Hey, where's the rescue squad?
We're it.
Which is funny because right around the same time we got Boromir defending the hobbits to his death in Fellowship of the Ring, another scene that floored us both then and now.
They took the little ones. He's down. Frodo. Where is Frodo?
I let Frodo go.
Then you did what I could not. I tried to take the ring from him.
The ring is beyond our reach now.
Forgive me. I did not see. I have failed you all.
No, Boromir. You fought bravely.
The fantasy element of Fellowship overpowered the quote-unquote reality of Black Hawk Down. We didn't care if it was real or not, we just saw sequences about the bravery required to stare death in the face.
Mortality is a theme Ridley revisits over and over again. His protagonists don't have superpowers, they're not bulletproof. The stakes in his films are always real, and the need for that in the stories we were seeing at home and in theaters became essential to really feeling anything by the time the credits rolled.
Randy, need a pistol mag!
If you wanted to find us in the winters of 2001 and 2002, it was watching this movie, and this scene specifically over and over and over again.
We'll get into why, of course, the movie was part of a rather unfortunate trend in American cinema in later episodes.
Indeed, we'll be touching on basically everything mentioned here as we go forward, because our appreciation for Ridley and Tony Scott turned into our window into the film industry.
Into the lives of artists, the language of film style,
Into America as a country.
and into ourselves.
The End of History is as comprehensive an attempt to look at the last 50 years of American cultural history as we can provide through the lens of 2 men who weren't born here.
Written and edited by 2 men who grew up in the shadow of their films, their influence, the world they made with their cameras.
When you're a kid in a small town, you can go to the movies to escape that. But today, the American cinema is no refuge at all. It reflects the world we live in all the worst ways.
We're going to try to figure out why. Because even before we started this project, we were obsessives, but now, everywhere we look, we see evidence of their influence. We are always obsessing about Ridley and Tony Scott.
What about you? You ever think he might come after you? You ever think about him at all?
Oh, at least 30 seconds of every day. Can't help it. He's always with me, like a bad habit.